What's up, everyone? Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Ilissa Nolan, Executive Director for the Texas Hemp Coalition. Hello, Ilissa Nolan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm finally feeling more settled. My fiance and I moved into our new place, and I have my new podcast studio set up. So things are rocking and rolling again. I can't complain. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, just trying to stay cool. I'm based in Austin, and originally from East Texas. So I have to remind myself when I go back home to East Texas that it might not be as hot, but it's more humid. And down here, it's just this dry hot that gets you, and you have to stay hydrated, stay inside. I'm trying to put on as much sunscreen as possible. So I'm just trying to survive. It's August in Texas, and then it's inevitable that it's going to be hot. So we're almost there to September. Once we get there, then hopefully football season will be back, and it'll be cool fall, crisp weather. So I'm looking forward to those days for sure.
Yeah, you and me both. It's getting tiresome to wake up at 8, 9 a.m. and it being already almost 100 degrees. That's
Oh,
this weather for you.
and I don't know what it is, us Texans that have grown up here our entire lives, we should be used to it by now, but it still offends me. I'm like, oh no, it is way too hot. I can't deal with this today.
It is. And you of anyone would know that. I know that you have a very strong agricultural background. So
Yes.
growing up in Texas, East Texas, as you said,
Mhm.
you're familiar with the heat and being outside on the farm, right?
Most definitely. I grew up on a cattle ranch. We had hay fields as well as some tree farms. So I'm very used to being outside during the summer, growing up, having to feed my animals. I should market animals as well. And then also just checking cattle out there. So yeah, you have to schedule it to where you're out early and then you're, at the barn later. It's definitely not a middle of the day type thing. You will not be able to survive, even though sometimes you have to get things done. But there's definitely times where you have to remind yourself to sit down, take a break, go into the shade, drink water. I was out at a planting party outside of Austin a couple of weeks ago, and we literally planted hemp with our hands into the Texas soil. And it was labor intensive. I'm so glad that I was able to do it. I feel like I learned more about the plant and just the labor side of things, how you put it into the soil and use, there's a bunch of fire ants everywhere. So we're just learning as we go. I mean, this is the first time we can grow hemp in the state of Texas since when? The 30s. So, it's exciting, but there were some times out there where I definitely almost passed out and I was just filling myself with electrolytes. I'm like, I should know better. I should know better.
Well, it's funny you circling back to the Texas heat and you mentioning that you were planting those hemp seeds by hand in the fields.
Yeah.
I've had consultants on where because Texas gets so hot in the summer that there's even a certain depth that you need to plant the seeds so that you don't burn the seed.
Yeah, so we transplanted actually. So we already had some plants that came straight from the greenhouse, but we actually didn't start planting them until about 6:30 or 7 at night, and we planted it until 2 or 3 in the morning.
Wow.
Because of the heat, it's so hot that it would shock the plants if you planted them earlier and they're being out into the sun. So at least overnight, it gives them a little bit of time to acclimate to the soil. And when the sun does rise, it's not as shocking on the system. So I had never been around that. Did not grow up around traditional row crop farming. I'm a livestock girl, so this was definitely a first for me, but it was fun to be able to say, hey, look, I actually planted some hemp into the Texas soil, and I'm getting to see them grow through the process and hopefully to harvest and then through processing. So I'm definitely saying that I'm talking the talk, I'm walking the walk. That I'm going to be able to go into those offices in the Capitol, even though I know the policy side of things. I feel like now I understand more of the industry and the agriculture standpoint.
Yeah, I mean that's good. You always it's always a good thing when you have someone who is not only, in the industry from an expert standpoint, you being the executive director of the Texas Hemp Coalition, but you're not scared to roll up your sleeves and get out there, and be part of the whole process, because as you mentioned, Texas is new, right? This is our first year planting.
Yeah, no, definitely not afraid. And I thought that it was very important that that was something that I participated in, not only from the Hemp Coalition standpoint, but just as one of the lobbyists that helped pass the bill. Just a little bit of background. I have been working in and around the hemp legislation since about 2015. That's when it was brought to the state capitol. So I was a staffer for state representative at that time. He was on the Ag and Livestock Committee, and they came in every day and talked to us about the bill. That time we were all like, what is this? It was actually brought up at the same time as the Compassionate Use Program, which is the medical marijuana program for children with epilepsy. So there was this weird situation where we had a lot of people voting yes for that bill and didn't want anything to do with for the hemp bill. And we're like, wait, this is actually legal through the 2014 Farm Bill. Like, it's a pilot program through universities.
Right.
Like, we're going to be behind people. So it's, working on it from a staffer's standpoint from 2015 to I worked for the Department of Agriculture in the state of Texas. And I got to learn the ins and outs of how programs are run through a state agency to ultimately me getting hired by a law firm and several clients to lobby on behalf of the legislation, and really having a hands-on experience of helping write the legislation to where it benefited the Texas farmer, but also we followed the federal guidelines as well. So it's been fun to say that I was one of the lobbyists that helped pass the bill and helped walk around the Capitol, really boots to the ground, educating members of the legislature of why we needed this to be passed, why Texas will hopefully be what we foresee being number one in the hemp industry, and then to ultimately just getting my hands dirty and planting some hemp in the ground, saying, look, I passed the bill and now here I am planting hemp into the ground. So it was really full circle and fulfilling to see that, and a little bit surreal at the same time. It's like we've been working on this since 2015 and it's 2020, 5 years later, we're finally doing this. So it truly shows that everybody's been working hard. It's a team effort.
Well, that's awesome. I definitely want to dive into what you learned, lobbying and establishing these programs and navigating the regulations for the state. But we talked about your agriculture background growing up. So when you started to get interested more in the industrial hemp side of things, was that a natural pivot for you, or how did you get interested in leading that effort?
Sure. So for me, agriculture is a big part of my background and who I am. My degrees are both in agriculture. I'm an Aggie first and foremost. So I went to Texas A&M University, Gig'em, and I got my degree in ag leadership and development with a minor in horticulture, actually. Back then, I thought I wanted to work in the wine industry. It was just beginning in the state of Texas. And so my parents said, nope, got to go to grad school. So Texas Tech recruited me to come over, and I got my master's in ag communications from Tech. So when I was at Tech, they said, hey, we have this internship program in Washington, D.C. We think you'd be great at it. So I moved to Washington, D.C., and I worked for the House Agriculture Committee. So I kind of saw myself following this ag policy world, right? So I knew that I could talk the talk. I knew the farmers. I knew the ranchers. I grew up in the industry. There aren't many of us out there that are wanting to go into politics or ag policy that actually came from it. So when I was in DC, I kind of saw that. I saw it as an opportunity and a niche for myself, and also something that I was passionate about. I'm not the type of person that could go work in just any industry and represent just anyone. It has to be something that I know about and that I'm passionate about. So from there, I moved back down to Austin, and I started working at the state capitol. I was a reading clerk for the House of Representatives. And from then, a lot of those legislators picked up on the fact that, like, oh, you're the ag girl. So I kind of got this reputation at the Capitol of being like a cowgirl, or they're like, oh, you're the ag queen, you're the old FFA queen over there as well. So I kind of started this image for myself of being a girl that came from the industry from rural Texas that knew about agriculture. And then I was able to put that into work through ag policy. And that's how I got my job working for State Representative Charles Doc Anderson, who is a huge ag representative. He's a veterinarian. also an Aggie as well. And then from there, the Department of Agriculture realized, oh, we've got this girl that's got this experience working in the legislature. Why don't you come work for us at the Department of Agriculture? Like, you understand it, you'll know who to talk to. When the legislators come over, they'll trust you. Because that's really what it is these legislators want to feel like that you know what you're talking about first and foremost. They have people that walk in every day to their offices that they're either going to listen to or they're not. They're going to trust them or they're not. And so I saw it as an opportunity with the experience in my background, but also my education. Everything just fit together. So it was a natural progression for me of just everything led to the next. And when I was hired on by Booth and Associates, they're a water law firm. I was hired on for something completely different. And they knew that I had an ag background. They said, we need help in rural Texas and we need help connecting this issue to agriculture. And then led to people finding out that I was a lobbyist, and they'd say, we want to get this hemp bill passed. Can you represent us? I also represent the olive growers as well. And so we had a bill passed for them. And so as I would go around to those offices and talk to them, and they realized like, oh, you're our ag girl. I can't tell you how many times I get called about just other issues. You know, they all think I represent all of them, but I don't. I'm like, I am the water, olive oil, and hemp girl. Like, that is me right now. That is my niche. But I proudly wear that badge of being the ag girl at this Texas State Capitol. And I hope there are more people that have my background that come and decide to work in ag policy, because we need more.
Right.
I'm looking for them every day in staffers in the Capitol. And it's getting harder and harder to find individuals that kind of grew up like I did, and are able to represent the issue. So yeah, it was a natural progression. Actually found an old newspaper article from when I was a senior in high school, and I got elected as a state FFA officer. And it said in there, if Ilissa Nolan doesn't have a career in politics, then maybe she'll be a lobbyist at some point. And so, like, totally manifested my career. Did not mean to, but here we are.
Everything happens for a reason. And like you said, it was a natural course that you took. You know, you took advantage of your strengths and your background, especially within ag, and timing was everything, right? Like you mentioned, 2014, the Farm Bill was passed. 2015, the pilot program started taking effect in Texas. And so when they first initially approached you about hemp, related to ag policy, what was your first thought? Like, I know you mentioned earlier that some people kind of dismissed it or voted against it, but was your education level up to speed with industrial hemp, or was that a learning process for you?
It was a learning process, obviously. I can remember in 2015 when they brought the legislation to us. I will say this, for me, I had come from Washington, D.C., so I understood policy on the federal level when it came to the Farm Bill. I never had the opportunity to work on the Farm Bill, but just from education and growing up in FFA and 4-H, we were very familiar with it. It was something that we were all affected by. So the pilot program was never really passed in the state of Texas, which kind of put us back a few. That's what we were trying to do, is get them to realize, let's not be behind other states, that we could potentially be number one. So for myself, I got educated on how would this program work in the state of Texas through the Department of Agriculture? What other agencies have to be involved in this? What is it going to look like in terms of FTEs, of individuals that are working for the Department of Agriculture to actually run the program? And my main selling point on this was that it was an ag commodity and a cash crop. That's what we had to do at the Capitol, is to get those legislators to realize that first and foremost, this is about agriculture and this is about our farmers. Historically, we have grown hemp in the state of Texas. We are one of the leading hemp states in the country. It's in the name of several of our cities in the state of Texas. So, you know, I tried to stay true to it being an ag commodity. If you think of any ag commodity that's out there, if you think of cattle, if you think of corn, grain, whatever it is, there are a lot of byproducts that come from those ag commodities. Mm-hmm. Hemp is the same way. There are hundreds of byproducts that come from the cannabis or the hemp plant. That's how you have to think of it. Those are all added benefits of a crop that our farmers can grow in the state of Texas that they can make money on to keep their family farms going. It's an opportunity for individuals, let's say, that have grown other crops in the state of Texas and say, hey, we're struggling we would like to diversify. I mean, you saw that when the wine industry came into the state of Texas. You saw a lot of our panhandle farmers who historically have grown cotton said, hey, let's diversify. Let's also have some vineyards as well. So that's what I'm hoping to see in hemp, is that a lot of these historical and generational farmers in the state of Texas see this as an opportunity to make more of an income for their families. Farmers are the backbone of the state of Texas. They're the backbone of the United States of America. And that's what I wanted to make sure that people understood. First and foremost, this is an ag commodity. Second, this ag commodity just happens to have a lot of wonderful byproducts that come with it that help a lot of different people, which is what you could say with anything.
Right. And I think that that's a really important message, because obviously over the years, there's a certain stigma attached to cannabis, right?
Yes.
Specifically when you think about THC and people getting high and smoking, but it's really important, that message that you nailed, which is it's an ag commodity. It's something that we can produce goods out of this crop. And I think you're speaking specifically to the non-consumable products. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking to all products, the consumable and non-consumable, fiber as well as cannabinoids.
So here's a follow-up question to that then.
Sure.
When you think about the future of Texas related to the industrial hemp market, where do you see Texas being number one in the state? Will it be for both of those commodities, the consumables and non-consumables, or do you think that Texas will lean more to the non-consumable side, which could be, the fiber, like you said, fiber, the herd, the biomass, and producing goods from that?
I think Texas can be number one in both of those. It's just going to depend on what it looks like after this first growing season. This is a research and development growing season for us. I mean, we have some farms out there that are struggling because maybe that varietal doesn't grow right in that area of the state of Texas. Maybe the soil isn't correct. There's too much humidity, too much water, too little water. So we don't know at this point. Seeing Texas and our ag industry, especially in the row crop world, I think industrial hemp, the fiber side, will probably be more successful in the long run in the state of Texas. We have a lot of land mass. We have a lot of unused ag land out there that people would like to see turned into maybe row crop farming and maybe farming hemp. We have a lot of generational landowners that said, hey, I'm looking to get into this. I feel like I can grow this on my land. A lot of people look at it as an ag exemption as well, which is perfectly fine. That helps out our industry too, and gets the good word out in education. But in the long run, I think it is going to be more of a production for fiber. But I think that the production for the consumable products as well will always be there. Where I'm from is greenhouse country in Texas. I think greenhouses are going to particularly be grown, in that type of atmosphere other than industrial, which is going to be the rest of the state of Texas. Again, I'm not an expert on the agronomy behind it all. That's just kind of what I've seen and the pulse of the state of Texas with all the individuals that I've been working with through the Texas Hemp Coalition, is that they see the industrial hemp side of things really, really being the long-term kind of goal that they would all like to reach, is making Texas number one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I've kind of seen that trend as well. I mean, to your point, Texas's land mass is huge, right? There's so much land out here. And this plant grows just by putting it in the dirt, right? So,
Right.
And obviously we know that on the industrial hemp side, speaking non-consumable products, it's much easier to process that plant because you're not having to take care of it as much with the trichomes and the cannabinoids.
Right.
That makes total sense. Yeah. When you say this is a test year, right? Because it's the first year where farmers have been issued licenses and they're able to grow hemp on a mass scale. Due to COVID, do you see this being like a true test year, or has COVID affected a lot of the growing operations that were planned for this year?
I will say this. We expected a lot more licenses for lot permits in the state of Texas than what we have. I don't necessarily think that's just due to COVID. I think it's due to our rules kind of being delayed a little bit to where these farmers could get their licenses to be able to plant the hemp at the appropriate amount of time. I think the reason that we're seeing some of these crops that are failing is because they weren't able to plant them at the perfect time frame that they should have, or they're planting a lot later. So yes, it is a true research year, just because we're seeing a decline in the amount of licenses that we gave out. I mean, we truly thought we were going to have at least 7,500 licenses that are out there, and there's maybe 2,000. I mean, and I don't even know if all of those 2,000 are actually growing hemp, or how many acres they're actually growing. You're seeing most farmers grow an acre to 2 acres. Which is what we suggested and recommended. So thank you, everybody, for following those recommendations. We think that you won't lose your rear ends, I guess, is what we would say, is that you're playing it safe. You'll know what works best for you, so that the next year when you grow, then maybe you can move it up to that 50, that 100 acres that the majority of our other farmers grow in the state of Texas. So yeah, it's a research year. I think Texas A&M University is doing a wonderful job doing the test plots and figuring out what works best. We're really leaning on them on the research side of things that we hopefully will be able to help with from a coalition standpoint, and educating our farmers and ranchers out there of just knowing what varietals work best. We're also leaning on a lot of groups from out of the state. Look, as Texans, we don't need to recreate the wheel, right? We need to look at leaders in other states who have been successful in what they have done, so that we can bring it to the state of Texas and hopefully be more successful. And that's what I'm trying to do with the Texas Hemp Coalition, is to connect all of these individuals that represent these successful state programs, successful businesses that will hopefully, make us all successful in the end. So it's all about collaborating. It's all about working together. It's all about putting legitimate business owners together in hopes of making sure that the hemp industry never goes away again, and that it stands for the test of time.
Right. And I want to dive deeper into the mission of the Texas Hemp Coalition and all the different activities that y'all have going on. But before we do that, I want to follow up on what you said about your recommendation for planting 1 acre in this test year.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, as part of that recommendation, because of the lack of processors out there currently? And I bring that up because that notion has been echoed by multiple guests on this podcast, in that the big challenge right now and the bottleneck in this industry is that it's an easy crop to grow, but in terms of processing all of that biomass and that flower is challenging because that infrastructure is not in place yet. Is that part of why you recommended the 1 acre?
Not necessarily. The reason that we recommended the 1 acre is because we truly don't know what varietals are grown best in the state of Texas. If you look back at an ag commodity like the wine industry, when they first started growing it, or if you look at the olive oil industry, they've been growing olives in the state of Texas for 10 years. They still don't know what varietals are grown best where. So for us, we said, okay, we're going to look at the trends that happen to wine and olive oil, and they're still trying to figure out what works best. Well, then we have no clue. We don't know if the seed that grows best in Northeast Texas is going to be the best seed for the Valley, or be the best seed for, the Panhandle. We don't know what that looks like. So that was a recommendation, just based off of, hey, grow 1 acre, grow 2 acres, see what works best, learn how to farm it. Let's figure out what are the pests that will be attacking the crop as well, which we've seen fire ants have been a really big issue in the state of Texas. They're killing a lot of the plants, and they're still trying to figure out what, fire ant pesticide do we use to make sure that our crop isn't just dying away, and then we're losing, 25% of our crop out there. So that's why we recommended that. The processor side of the thing, we're still developing the infrastructure in the state of Texas. I think once we do start growing the bigger masses in the state, that we're going to need more processors. I think I was told that it was every 200 miles, depending on how much that you're growing, you're going to need a processing facility, depending on if that's for extraction or if that's for fiber. So we're just not there yet. I do think that this is our building year. I will say that again, and that we're still educating our farmers so that this next growing season that they're ready to go. And I think we're going to see huge masses of land being farmed for hemp, as well as seeing some processors that we already know that are out there that are building out their infrastructure really have a win. Will they be able to process it all? We don't know, but we're going to be figuring out along the way. And that's another reason why we're here, is to help build out that infrastructure.
Mhm. Yeah. And is there any other challenges or opportunities that you're seeing as we're in this test year?
Challenges that we're seeing are, through the statute in the state of Texas, we have a seed certification program. Federally, there is not a seed certification program for hemp. In the state of Texas, we do have that. Now, what they have is an approved seed list where to be able to use a seed in the state of Texas, you go through the Department of Agriculture as an approved seed. So it'll be interesting to see how we move and transition into seed certification in the state of Texas and how we regulate farmers that are growing the seed, making sure that it is actually certified. I think the transportation manifest of transporting the hemp has been working really well. I know that the Department of Agriculture has really stayed on top of that. They're being very efficient, as well as getting out the lot crop permits, the licenses for our labs, for our processors, whoever. So the main challenges are figuring out what varietals work best, how to actually grow the hemp in the state of Texas, building out infrastructure. How many processors do we need for extractors, for fiber, as well as building out the infrastructure as far as manufacturing goes. Because yes, you can grow it, someone can purchase it in the state of Texas to process it, but eventually it's made into a product. And it's making sure that we have the appropriate manufacturers in line. And then also we're protected on the retail side of things. I mean, there's a completely another set of laws through the Department of State and Health Services that run the consumable side of things through per FDA's rules. So again, they're running it through as a dietary supplement. They've been running that program. It's the same thing with licenses, which is great. We don't like to recreate the wheel. We want something that's going to be successful. But it's going to be challenges with retail, understanding that they are going to have a license to be able to sell consumable hemp, whether that's at a retail store or if it's a brand that's selling online. And then also the challenge of getting people to understand that you are not going to be able to sell, manufacture, or process smokable hemp in the state of Texas. That I'm sorry, that's the way that it is. It was in the legislation, it was in statute, and it's also in rules. So it's getting people to understand that as of yesterday, August 2nd, was when the rules became effective through the Department of State and Health Services. They've got a 60-day grace period to make sure that they have their licenses to stay up to date, because obviously we don't want to see our retail businesses suffer for not following the laws that are out there. So those are the struggles that I see. And again, that's why we've developed the Texas Hemp Coalition, is trying to keep people up to date with what the laws and regulations are, that they're staying in line with that. I definitely not somebody that ever thought I would create a nonprofit, but because of my background in agriculture and also in the legislature and working on hemp, I was voluntold. They said, hey, this industry, ag, you've got the relationships with the agencies in the university. Please do this, because we need somebody that first and foremost is going to put a good face on the industry, and then also to be able to connect the connectors, to connect the dots, to make sure that we're not going to suffer, and that we will prevail in the end of this when we're figuring out what the program looks like.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you used that term. So that recent law that was passed, the ban on smokable hemp, I've read in articles they use the term smokable flower, which can be a bit confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the biomass is flower, which you can sell wholesale to someone who then is going to do whatever they want with that flower, right? Extract it. So I'm glad that you said smokable hemp, because that implies that you can't smoke the flower, but you can sell the flower as biomass, correct?
Yes, you can sell the flower as biomass. You just cannot sell a product for smokable hemp in the state of Texas. And so it's pretty black and white when they say that. And I've gotten a kick out of a lot of people that have said, this is ridiculous, Texas. What are you doing? You're setting us back. And it's like, well, where were you when we were writing this legislation? We had to make compromises. And that's what we want people to understand, is that, yes, that might be in the statute right now, but the whole point of my job and what I do is to be able to fight on behalf of the people in our industry for what benefits them the most. If that is something of concern, then that will be my job based off of the membership of the coalition. And that was in there from the beginning. It was put this in there or your legislation might not get passed. And it's kind of like, well, we had to make a compromise to make sure that you could be able to even grow it in the state of Texas. So that's how the legislature works. And there are always changes that can be made. That's why people like me are employed in what we do, is to be able to go into the Capitol and say, hey, our businesses and our farmers are suffering. They could be making this margin for selling this byproduct that is now banned in the state of Texas, when you could open it up, and therefore money is going back into the state through taxes, which makes the state of Texas a lot more money. So it's just getting them to understand it from an economic development standpoint, rather than connecting it to its cousin on the cannabis side, thinking that you can get high from smoking it. For us, we saw it as why are we even worried about that? You can't get high for it. That's common sense to us. But education plays a huge part in it, and getting them to realize it's a byproduct.
Right.
It's not going to get you high. But at the same time, this is an economic development opportunity for the state as well. So if that's what my membership wants me to do and focus on, then I will focus on it. We're not quite there yet, but I think that it will definitely be something that we focus on in the future.
Right. And I think that's the right approach, right? You don't want to, put all your chips in at once and, run the risk of not getting approval when,
right.
You could do a little give and take. And then over time with learnings and education, you can then go back and say, well, look, here, like you said earlier, here's the margins we're missing, right? Here's the opportunities that are being missed at this point.
Yeah.
So that's a really good approach that you're taking there. And so circling back, you mentioned that there's approximately 2,000 farmers that have been issued licenses to grow hemp. What percentage of those farmers currently would you say are growing to process the fiber as opposed to extract the cannabinoids?
I can't answer that. I don't know the particulars on that. From what I've seen from individuals that I know that are processing or growing in the state of Texas, I think a lot are actually trying to grow for fiber. And then we do have probably a much larger percentage that are processing for consumable hemp. So I don't know, but and who knows, the lot crop permit number might have gone up from 2,000 as well. That was as of a month ago. So I try not to bother the Department of Ag too much. They're busy, they're bogged down, but yeah, it's just a lot lower numbers than we thought they would be. But yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time. I wish I could answer that question, but I just don't know.
Yeah, no, and over time we will learn,
we will.
Especially as more farmers are being issued those licenses in the coming years. There's going to be much more. So
yes.
Nice. So you touched on the mission for the Texas Hemp Coalition. What else? What other things are y'all working on that you haven't touched on? And then a follow-up question to that is, what is the Texas Hemp Coalition's focus going to be for the 2021 session coming up?
Sure. So the Texas Hemp Coalition was founded because we needed individuals there to help with education, advocacy, and networking in the industry. We've been really lucky that in the past month, we've become connected to a lot of different organizations nationally that we will get to partner with. When it gets to that point and we do officially launch our organization, we're rounding out our founding board members at the moment. We will launch officially and be connected to about 3 different federal groups: U.S. Hemp Roundtable, Hemp Industries Association, and then also the National Hemp Industrial Council as well. So pretty big heavy hitters to be connected to for our organization that is new, which is very, very exciting. What we see is really focusing on advocacy, which in my eyes and a lot of other people's eyes, advocacy is number one most important thing. Obviously, we know that because without the legislation that was passed, you would not be able to grow hemp in the state of Texas or across the United States of America. So working on advocacy, looking back at the legislation to see what has been working for us and what hasn't been working for us. That might be in terms of the testing regulations, sampling regulations, the percentage of hemp when it comes to what's legal and what's illegal, remediation when destroying your crop if you do test hot. Those are all things that we're looking at, and it might be something on the side of what does it look like regulating other parts of the industry as well.
When you, I'm sorry to cut in, but when you When you mentioned the levels, right? I've also heard and read articles that the USDA was thinking about even lowering the 0.3% THC levels for hemp. What have you heard on that end?
I know that there's a lot of conversation going around for some national organizations of trying to get USDA and the federal government to move it up to that 1%. I have heard discussion of that.
That would be
I think
that would be great, wouldn't it? It makes
I think that would be great. It would give us a lot of leeway. The only thing in the state of Texas is our compassionate use program. I think it's the 0.05%, which is two away from what hemp is. So it's a really sticky situation. So I think eventually that might be something that we work on, also at the discretion of the members of the coalition of what they want. But yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. That it was what we tell people, is that legislation is ever changing, because we want to make sure that it's benefiting the individuals that are actually in that industry.
Yeah.
So,
it makes it more difficult, I would think, for Texas farmers, just because we talked earlier about the Texas heat, right?
right.
And so I guess these plants in Texas are more susceptible to become hot if they're not properly taken care of and being monitored. Is that
Yeah.
fair?
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And again, I'm not an expert when it comes to the farming and the agronomy side of things, but that's what I've been told from a lot of the experts out in the field, is that they're worried about in the state of Texas that a lot of our crops will test hot. But that's why we have some amazing companies that have come into the state of Texas, like New Bloom Labs, who have sampling kits where you literally can send them a sample and do an unofficial test to see where your crop is at. Which I just think is wonderful. And they're great guys, and they are going to be on our founding board as well. But having that at your fingertips for those farmers to be able to say, hey, look, I want to be able to monitor my crop to see where I'm at. So I'm not surprised whenever I have a sampler come out and take 2 samples, and then we send it back in and it tests hot multiple times and I'm having to destroy my crop. So it is a scary industry. And I think that's another reason why we saw a decline in people that were getting those lot crop permits, because they just don't know. They're all scared. A lot of these traditional farmers are like, I don't grow a regulated crop. I don't have to have all these licenses to grow this. So why do I have to have one for hemp? So it's scary for them, but we're seeing a lot of them open more up to the idea of growing it on their family farms.
Right. And what would you say are some best practices when it comes to testing your crop? I mean, is there any windows of time that you would suggest, or however many times you should do it before you're actually ready to harvest and test?
Again, I'm not an expert on that, so I'm going to push everybody over to New Bloom Labs website. They are, John and Jesse Kearns are the owners in that, and they will give you a better answer than I would. I'm the policy person.
Well, awesome. Well, maybe you can make an intro and we could have one of them on the podcast.
Definitely. They would be wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, what else did you want to talk about? I know that we're running up on time, but is there anything that else you wanted to talk about from the perspective of the Texas Hemp Coalition, or what you're seeing in terms of the future of this industry?
Yeah, we're really excited to be here, and I'm excited to be a part of it. It's been fun seeing it literally from when it was brought into the Capitol to actually planting the hemp into the soil, and ultimately me becoming the executive director of a nonprofit that I'm helping form. So we will have opportunities for membership once we do form as an official organization. We do have our founding board members. I will say that we have a stout group of individuals that will be representing the Hemp Coalition for the state of Texas. And these people range from processors to manufacturers to laboratories to farmers to people from the health industry as well. So that's our goal, is to bring everyone together, represent all different aspects, and be an umbrella. We truly feel like there are rooms for several organizations in the state of Texas, but we would like to be that more premier advocacy-based organization and nonprofit that really can make a difference when it comes to legislation, and to be able to connect the dots. That's what we want to do. And I think that we are definitely in a position for that, and we will be once we launch. So keep a lookout in the month of August for an official launch, hopefully, of the Texas Hemp Coalition. Our website is www.texashempcoalition.org. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Our Instagram and Twitter handle is @TX Hemp Coalition. We're trying to keep everybody updated with the regulations and what's going on in the state of Texas so that they were aware. For example, I did a post about the smokable hemp ban, and it was surprising the amount of people that were like, wow, this is what we've needed. Thank you so much. I'm like, really? I thought everybody knew about that, but I guess not. But it was just going into detail of why it was there, what they need to look at in terms of if they've got smokable hemp in their store, then I would probably get rid of it type of thing, because these agencies will definitely come in, they will give you fines, and then ultimately your business could be shut down, which is definitely not what we want to see. So that's what I'm here for, and that's what we're doing. It's really exciting to help develop a new crop in the state of Texas, and I'm honored to represent the ag industry as an ag girl myself, and to hopefully see that this crop is successful in the future and that it helps out a lot of our generational family and landowners.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, we all need the support right now, and we all need to work together because, as you've said and hit on, it's such a new industry. We're in our first year, and so the more that people can collaborate and share best practices and learn from one another's mistakes, it's just going to make Texas stronger in this space. So,
Definitely.
and I have tuned into your Zoom, or not your Zoom, but your Facebook Live. Was on the Texas Hemp Coalition. So yeah, as Ilissa mentioned, there's great content that they're pushing out there, very informative and it adds a lot of value. So I just want to thank you so much, Ilissa, for being on today. And, I look forward to having you on in the future as things develop.
Definitely. Well, thank you again. And thank you for giving us this platform to where we can show people what the Hemp Coalition is about. We do think that the work that we're doing is very important, but we want to be able to represent everyone as a whole. And I appreciate you enjoying our webinars. That was part of our goal, is to make sure that we're getting information out from the mouths of the individuals that are actually running the program. So I can talk about it all day, but when you hear it from people from the Department of Agriculture to the Department of State and Health Services to Texas A&M University, I mean, those are the guys that are really running the program. So I would like to thank them for all of their hard work and their staff's hard work and what they're doing to make sure that this is successful. And then hopefully we'll get to work on it on the back end to continue to make things successful at the state capitol. So thank you again for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. And I can't wait to see how things unfold in the state of Texas in the coming months and years.
I will.
Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk again next time. All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.